Hello everyone and welcome to another video with me, 320 Sim Pilot. I'm a real world airline pilot. I currently fly the Boeing 777 as you see in front of you here, and I'm going to be taking you through a tutorial today on how to fly a go around or a missed approach in the Boeing 777. This is a very different procedure to the Airbus. It's a good bit of fun actually. It's quite involved and there's quite a few gotchas that you need to be aware of. So in this video I'm going to take you through that. I'll be taking it through right from the beginning, so if you've got no experience with the 777 but you want to know how to go around in it, let's say you've just followed my beginner tutorials so you can do a flight in it but you want to be able to go around, this will be the video for you. I think it will also be interesting for those of you coming from the Airbus, or even if you don't fly the 777, just to see some of the differences in the Boeing, and you might also learn a few things about some incidents, some famous incidents that have happened in the past in the Boeing 777 whilst trying to go around with regards to its modes, its vertical modes, its automation, and the sequence of events that have to happen. So I'll be taking you through all of those today in this video. Like I say, I currently fly the Boeing 777 in the real world. I was previously flying the Boeing 787, which is the same type rating, but now I do fly this aircraft as well, or have now flown this aircraft as well. You may also know me from my Airbus tutorials, so I'll be giving you some context from my previous Airbus experience as well as we compare the difference in the Boeing to the A320. We're going to take this for an approach into London Heathrow, no surprise there, onto 27 right, and we'll look at the sequence of events and what might go wrong. Let's get started. I'll be filming this video in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 in the Boeing 777-200. However, this is still applicable to the 777-300 and of course Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, 2024 and X Plane if you're flying the flight factor in X Plane. So as a starting point, we are here in the hold at Biggin Hill at 6,000 feet, and we have set up for an approach onto the ILS runway 27 right. If you're not sure how to get the aircraft into this position, then please do follow my 777 PMDG tutorials which are on my channel. They'll take you from cold and dark all the way through to landing, and I have one particularly about the descent, approach and landing. But there we go. So just to fill you in on what we've done, I have set up in the departure arrivals page in Heathrow arrivals. It will be in the index page. Here we go. ILS 27 right. We're going via Biggin. As you can see, we have the hold, and then here is the arrival procedure, which is not shown on this chart. This is just the final approach chart. But whatever star you have and transition onto the ILS, you have. I've also put in the correct flap setting. So we are going to land flap 25, auto brake 3. I've done the landing performance, and it's fine. I've also put in the minimums of 280 baro, which is in here. So these are the things we absolutely need to do. 278 there, so I've rounded it to 280. And set the auto brake as I said. The other thing worth doing, of course, is making sure that in your NavRad page, the ILS is tuned 110.3, course of 269. Finally, we're flying the missed approach, so it's a really good idea to check on the legs page that it has the missed approach coded. So let's check that that matches what we have on our approach chart. So your missed approach in Jefferson is up at the top, in Lido it's down at the bottom, but anyway, missed approach, climb straight ahead when you pass 1580 feet or D0.0 India Romeo Romeo. That means 0 miles on the ILS, so when you reach the DME beacon. Whichever is later, climbing right turn, track 316 to 3000 feet, then as directed. So what we can do is we can go to plan. I'm going to zoom right in, and then if I press step, it will jump and we can see the LNAV path. And if it was more complicated, let's say it said head up here, head to a VOR, head back to Biggin, we would see that line drawn here, and we can check in here. So the ILS finishes at runway 27 right, then 1580 feet on the straight ahead, so 269, make a right turn 316 to 3000 feet. Now it doesn't show the 0D part of it, but that's fine, that's in there. So there we go. So worth checking that we have that set up and ready to go as well. In ITREF we've done the weights. So we are now pretty much ready to fly our approach. You would run your descents checklist. So recall, we've checked, no notes, auto brake 3, landing data, VREF 25, 143 minimums. VREF 25, 143 is our approach speed. And then we have baro of 280. And then approach briefing. So I'm not going to talk too much about the rest of the approach because we're focusing on one thing in today's tutorial. But something I will talk about is the missed approach actions. So to go around in a Boeing, much like the other large airliners like the A320 or any aircraft really, it involves several stages. First of all, you need to get the power on, so we're going to move the thrust levers forward. To do that on the Boeing 777, we press this toga button here. It's actually hidden in front of the thrust levers. It's this button here. Now it's a bit fiddly to get to from this viewpoint, so there's a shortcut which is installed by PMDG, which is this screw here. If you click on that, it will then press that button for you. So that's what I'm going to use today. So if you see me clicking here, that is just because that shortcut is built into this for ease of simulation. That will drive the auto throttle system to provide you the modes toga, which is what we're going to want. That's the same modes we have for takeoff. What it means is it will drive the thrust forwards and it will then pitch up, and that's what we need to do, right? We need to get away from the ground. So by pressing that button, the thrust comes on and the airplane will pitch up. This is assuming your autopilot is still in. All of this is with the autopilot in. Then, once we've done that, we need to call for flaps 20. In the 777, you go around flaps 20. Our landing options are 20, 25 or 30, but in the normal scenario, it's 25 or 30. You only land flap 20 in abnormal situations. So we're going to talk about standard situations here. So 25 or 30 is our landing flaps. From either of those, when we go around, once we've got the power forward and we're pitching the airplane up, we're going to bring the flaps to 20. The idea of this is to remove the drag that could hinder our climb away from the ground, which is the most important thing we want to do as quickly as possible. So flaps go to 20. We don't want them to go any further than that, because if we start bringing too much flap in, we'll lose lift off the wing. And also, we don't want the slats to come in at the front of the wing. And if you go above 20, they'll start to reduce in the amount. And at flaps 1, they'll up to up, they finally come in. So that's why we have these notches here. In the real aircraft, you can't jump through those. If you lift it up at 30 and tried to go all the way to up, it wouldn't. It would stop here at 20. Same again, from 20 to up, you can't do. It would stop at 1. It's just to stop you accidentally slipping or making a mistake. So the flaps will go to 20 when we go around. That's great. Now we'll be climbing away. We'll have loads of thrust on. The flaps will be at 20, and then we need to get the gear in. So it'll be, once we know we have a positive rate of climb, we'll raise the landing gear. Then we'll be climbing away, and we'll want to follow this routing we have in here. So we need to make sure LNAV engages. And we'll climb up to that 3,000 feet, which we'll have set in the window on the approach. And I'll talk about all of this as we go through it. But this is just a rough brief for those of you who are ready for it. So, sounds pretty straightforward, right? But there's plenty of gotchas. First of all, this procedure will not work if you're in the flare. Once you're too low to the ground, you can't rely on pressing the toga button, because it may not activate. And that has happened, which caused an aircraft to go around thinking they had pressed the button and that thrust was coming on. It didn't come on. And then they ran out of energy as they tried to climb away, and they raised the landing gear, and it was very nasty, as you can imagine, because you're effectively climbing away without any thrust. So how do we stop that? Well, now we press that button, we call for flaps 20, and then the immediate thing we do then is check the thrust has come on. Has the thrust actually been applied? Because you could have all the toga modes showing, but no thrust, which is what happened. So we're going to make sure the thrust is applied. Next up, we need to be aware that the airplane does not go to full thrust when it does a go around. The 777 is quite clever, and what it will do is it will actually try and go around at a sensible rate of climb, somewhere around a 2,000 feet per minute rate of climb. It won't go to full thrust and just charge upwards. So don't be surprised if you don't get maximum go around thrust. The thrust limiter at the top here will say G/A because it's enabling the engines to go around thrust if they need it. The reason is it can activate a wind shear, or you might suddenly get a wind shear, and in which case the engines need to be able to get all the thrust out. Now, if you don't think the airplane's climbing very well, or you want it to go up quicker than it is, let's say you're doing a go around because there's something in front of you and you want to out climb it, and it isn't a GPWS maneuver, so for some reason you want to climb away from the ground as quickly as possible, all you have to do is press the toga button again, and it will actually remove that restriction. It will just go straight to full thrust. But there you go. But that's something to talk about slightly later. So, in summary, our actions for a go-around: push the toga button, check we have toga and toga, make sure the thrusters come on, move the flaps to 20, thrust set, positive rate, and we'll raise the landing gear, and then we'll make sure we go into lateral navigation and fly that magenta line we saw. Something to be aware of is that there's lots of different fits of the Boeing 777. If you go menu, PMDG setup, aircraft, equipment, you'll see some of the options. One of the top ones here is auto LNAV on the go around. So in this aircraft it's disabled. I need to press LNAV. You need to do that somewhere after 400 feet, or at 400 feet ideally. You'll press LNAV and the airplane will carry on flying that lateral navigation path. If it's enabled, the airplane will automatically go into LNAV, such as on the Boeing 787, and obviously they fitted that to these later 777s, so there you go. Right, let's go and fly it. I think we've done enough talking. So I'm going to say approach briefing is complete. That is the descent check is complete. We're also already on our QNH, so I'll say altimeter's on 1013. That's the approach check is complete. And now we will simply exit our hold. If I go to the right page, exit hold. And now we're going to fly the approach. I'll see you on the ILS. So here we are, shortly joining the ILS. I'm just going to bring the speed back to the flap 5 speed. Now, some things to remember, and this is true in the Airbus as well as it is in the Boeing. You need to keep your flight plan sequence, so your 2 waypoint needs to stay in front of you. If you've flown along here and you intercept the ILS at, say, 4 miles for whatever reason, you're doing a visual approach, then you still need to sequence the flight plan so that it's the next waypoint is the runway in front of you. I'm flying towards the CF27 right point, so this is looking good. It has sequenced correctly. There's the localizer active. I'm going to arm the approach. You can see the localizer and glide slope diamonds are working. And now FF is active in front of us, and so on. It's really important. Glide slope is armed. The next thing is the go around altitude. We're flying an ILS today, and I will assume you are too. If you're flying an ILS, then you can leave the go around altitude or set it as soon as you're in glide slope mode. So there's glide slope mode. Now on the chart, it's 3,000 feet officially. I'm actually going to wind it up just to give me more time to explain things. I'm going to say it's 6,000 feet, but it of course isn't in real life. Let's take flap 15. Try and slow down the airplane a little bit. In fact, it will give me more time to talk if I just lower the landing gear. So we'll lower the gear. Let's gear down, and we'll arm our speed brake. Let's go flaps 20. Now, if you're doing a non-precision approach, remember, you would have to, it's like an RNAV approach, then you would need to put the MDA in here first by being in auto mode. You wind it down to the MDA, you start down, and once you're 300 feet below the missed approach altitude, which now we're pretending is 6,000 feet, so as soon as you're below 5,700 feet, you would then wind it up to be your new altitude. That's because you have to lower the altitude so that the airplane winds itself down. It will start down and then you can put it in, but that's complicated. So ILS, you put it in as soon as you're in glide slope, and here we go, coming down the ILS in glide slope. Let's go to our landing flap 25. Let's bring the speed back to VREF +5, which is there, and now we're ready for the landing checklist. So once the flaps have traveled, that will go green, and that's the landing checklist complete. So we're ready to land. We're below our go-around altitude. We are sequenced. 27 right is in front of us, and we're in a good place. And we can see 27 right down here. So they're all looking pretty good. Now, if we need to go around, we've already seen, if I wind the scale up, you'll see that the path is ready to go there. But remember, it won't do that itself. We have to tell it LNAV on my particular aeroplane. You might set yours differently. These modes that are just armed are all to do with auto landing, so we're not too worried about those. So this sort of go around is the full go around maneuver. Like I say, it's designed for the gear and everything. So that's, let's say we've got unstable now, or maybe air traffic says we're getting too close to the airplane in front, we need to go around. So what are our actions? Remember, we're going to push the toga button, which I'm going to do by clicking here. We're going to make sure that moves forward and we get toga and toga mode. Then we should see the thrust coming on, and we'll call for flaps 20. Flaps will come to 20, we'll check the thrust has arrived, and then we'll look for positive rate, gear up. At 400 feet, which is when the LNAV should engage, we will make sure we've pressed LNAV. So I think it's time we give it a go. Right, so let's say traffic say go around. I'm going to push the button, and remember this only works at this point. It does not work once we're over the threshold into the flare. It's not safe to use. I'll show you that later. I'm going to push the button. We get thrust, which means it's going to go around thrust. Toga, toga. So that's all working out, and I'll say flaps 20. Flaps come up a stage to 20. Then we're going to check we have thrust set, which we do. You see it's not gone to full go around thrust. The limiter is at go around, but the engines don't need it because they're doing their climb rate. Plenty of climb as it is. Positive rate of climb, gear up. Now we're already above 400 feet. That's 400 feet above the airfield. So we need to engage LNAV. You'll see it has not done it. So now we have thrust LNAV toga. And now we're in a good place. We can actually leave the airplane to climb like this all the way to the missed approach altitude, 6,000 feet. We don't need to accelerate early, and in fact it can make life easier if we don't. Some airlines may have a procedure where they expect you to accelerate at a normal acceleration altitude, for example 1,000 feet above the airfield, 1,500 feet. But I would say do this if you can. Thrust LNAV toga. We're now making that right turn as we've gone through 1580 and 0D on the ILS there. So as expected, it's made the right turn, and we know we're going up to 6,000 feet instead of 3,000. Something to note is 3,000 feet is in the box. So if we were to engage VNAV, which is how we would get it to accelerate, it would actually level off at 3,000 feet. So that's something to be aware of. If it levels off at an altitude you don't want, just like normal, click on this window and it will carry on back up VNAV speed, thrust ref. Once you do accelerate, remember to bring the flaps in. So 20 to 5. Once you're above 5, we can get to 1. And then once you're above 1 and accelerating, we'll go to up. And there we go. That's it. We have successfully gone around. The airplane's reconfiguring. It's cleaning up. The flaps are coming in. The gear's up. And we're on the missed approach in lateral navigation. So we're all in a safe place. And remember, on lots of airports, this Heathrow one's a bit funny because it just points us off into nowhere. There are a lot of airports where it would actually put you into a hold or something like that, and that would all be coded, and in LNAV it would fly there. Something else we want to check is that it has actually gone into climb mode now. You remember I showed you that this was saying G/A, that's go around thrust. That's where the limiter on the engines is. That means the most the auto throttle will give you is go around thrust, which is the maximum thrust we can get from the aeroplane. It's now gone to climb, so that's a good thing. It means it will use it only up to climb thrust. We can't let it use go around thrust forever. Now it doesn't really matter because pretty quickly you'll level off like this and the thrust will come back and you won't be anywhere near those limits. But there is a scenario if you were to go around and immediately divert where you might climb up to 20,000 feet or more, and in that case we don't want it to run at go around thrust the whole time. All you have to do to fix that is press flitch, or you could press continuous. You'll see this climb con button allows us to force it into climb mode. Even if it said G/A, you press that, it should go to climb. Alternatively, pressing flitch will put it into climb as well. But there we go. So that's some of the tricks, and it sounds like quite a lot. If you think of the Airbus, you just push the thrust levers all the way forward and bring the flaps up a stage. The Boeing's a bit different. We've got to press the button, we've got to make sure the thrust is coming up, we've got to check it on here, we've got to get the flaps to 20 from whichever they were. So it could be up 2 stages if you were landing flap 30. And then we need to check we get LNAV mode in. We need to also check we get the right thrust limiter in, because none of this is automatic on the Boeing. It's quite remarkable. I say it's not automatic. You'll see that it did go to climb today, but that's because I pressed this button here. Now, let's say, well, that was air traffic's fault. We want to do another approach. So what I'm going to do, if I go to the legs page, you'll see there's nothing left. So if I go to Heathrow arrivals, I can put in the ILS 27 right again. And let's say we're coming in from the north, so we'll go via Bovingdon this time, and then we can just imagine air traffic control routes us to Bovingdon to fly another approach, and then you do the same thing. You'll see that the VREF has stayed in and the minimums have stayed in, so you've got to make sure those are still correct. Our auto brake stayed in because we didn't land, so that's ready to go. So actually, in this sense, is now quite simple in the Boeing. Something to watch though is that your cruise altitude changes as well. So because I pushed that button to get it to 6,000, it updated the cruise altitude to 6,000 in here. It's not such an issue when you're flying an ILS, but if you were flying an RNAV approach, you do need to update that. Otherwise, when we then press VNAV to fly the later stage of the approach, the final approach, the airplane would not be able to intercept it because it would have a different altitude in its head, probably lower down, probably your go around altitude, so it wouldn't ever find the path, it wouldn't ever intercept it. But there we go. So you can see I can now use VNAV. We're in LNAV VNAV path, the airplane's at 250 knots and we're carrying on sort of like we were earlier. Now it's not recommended. Once you can also, by the way, disarm the speed brakes until we put the gear back down. You would now of course do the after takeoff checklist. Landing gears up, flaps are up, checklist complete. You would run your descent checklist, so recall check, notes, auto brake, landing data and approach briefing are all still the same. And we can do the approach checklist. We are on the altimeters of 1013. So that is the essence of a standard go around, with a few of the traps. So once again, push toga, let the thrust start moving, call for flaps 20, check the thrust has actually been applied, positive rate, gear up, and then at 400 feet make sure LNAV mode goes in, and then you can leave it like that up until it levels off at the go around altitude, and then remember you might need to push this button to get it into climb limited thrust, or press flitch. That's just sort of an extra little step, and then you can run your checklist and reconfigure. So next I want to talk about a slightly different sort of go around. What if we wanted to go around, as I said earlier, from the runway? We can't actually do it in the same way. The reason is this toga button doesn't work. In the last few feet before touchdown it won't work. So when we're flying a missed approach from the runway, we need to do it in a different way, and that is quite interesting. What you'll do is you will say go around and push the thrust levers fully forwards. You'll go full forwards, and then you will disconnect the auto throttle system like this, full forward, and then you press this little black button, or you have it coded, so I've got it on my hardware. So full forward and disconnect. You'll see that the thrust mode goes blank, and then we get full thrust. We're forcing full thrust out of the aeroplane. And I'm just going to re-engage the auto throttle while we are here. Just don't need it to do that. Let's also descend down, ready for our next approach. So that's what we'll do initially. Then we don't do anything. We let the thrust come on and we hold the airplane where it is, because this is a bulk landing effectively. We need to make sure that we don't accidentally try and go around before the thrust is in or when we're going to strike the tail. So we hold the thrust in that full thrust position. The airplane may settle on the runway. We have landing flaps out, so we may get a config warning. You'll recognize this because it's almost identical to the Airbus so far, except we have to disconnect that auto throttle. Let the airplane touch down if it needs to. Don't raise the nose yet. Let the energy get back into the airplane. Once the airplane speed goes back above the bug, the magenta bug, which will be your approach speed, then you will rotate like a normal sort of takeoff. So initially a careful slow rotation just to get the airplane away from the ground. What we don't want to do is strike the tail by heaving it up too quickly. So gentle rotation initially. Then once the nose is up and we're away from the ground and the energy's in and the thrust is in, then we can pitch the airplane up to 15 degrees, which is effectively the go-around setting. So you go around pitch attitude. Once it's up at 15 degrees, you can pause for a second. The airplane's in a stable configuration. We're climbing away from the ground. And then we can say, okay, I will go around now. And then you just do the same go-around we just saw. So you push the toga button, say go around, push the toga button, flaps 20, flaps will move to 20, check the thrust is set, positive rate, gear up. So let's give that one a go. Now so far we're about to fly our rejected landing maneuver, but I've been talking about how to do this with the autopilot in. There is pretty much no difference if the autopilot is out. If we were to disconnect the autopilot, we would do the same actions. We would push the toga button. The only difference is we would then pitch the flight directors using the yoke, using our manual flying. So that's the only difference. The auto throttle system stays in because we land with the auto throttle system engaged on the Boeing 777. That's just the way it's set up. The auto throttle will automatically close on landing. It's designed to be left in. It's unlike the 737. So auto throttle stays in. So like I say, if the autopilot isn't in, you simply do the same actions, push the toga button, make sure that the thrust lever is moving forwards, call for flaps 20, but at the same time you're going to be pitching up to follow that toga vertical flight director. It's that simple. There we go. There's our landing flap setting. There's the glide slope, and we'll put in our going altitude. This time we'll just use the standard 3,000 feet. So there's the mode, speed, lock, glide slope. We're fully configured. Checklist, landing checklist is complete. And now we'll do our bulk landing procedure. So remember, this one we will have the autopilot out, but we'll still have the auto throttle in. But we cannot rely on pressing the toga button because we'll be too low. And like I say, this has caused an accident because what happened was they pushed the toga button, pushed the toga button, but the thrust levers did not advance. So the airplane did not get the energy into it, did not get the power to climb. Now you might say, well, why would you raise a landing gear? The reality is an airplane does not approach at the stall. We are well above the stall. You can actually see here 120 knots is the minimum maneuvering speed. Down to 100 knots is where the stick shaker, realistically, you're going to be into real problems. So this is a big margin. So what would happen is if I was to go to idle thrust or leave the thrust where it is, or reduce it slightly and then just pitch the airplane up, the airplane would climb initially. So the temptation would be you think you've pressed toga, or you think you have toga thrust coming, you rotate the airplane, you get positive rate and you raise the landing gear, and then you realize you don't have the thrust, you run out of energy with the nose up high, and that's where you can get into problems. So yeah, the airplane has enough energy in this situation to immediately start climbing, regardless of the thrust situation. And that's what could catch you out. Right, so here we go then. We're on final approach. We're going to do a normal landing technique, but I'm just going to imagine that for some reason we decide to go around. You would typically go around like this. This would be for if you think you're not going to land in a safe place on the runway. Maybe you're going to miss the touchdown zone, so land too far down the runway. Maybe you're going to go too much towards the side and you're not happy with that. Maybe the airplane is sinking too fast suddenly, so you just want to get the airplane with some energy in it. Because remember, let's say you have some gusty winds and the airplane starts falling out the sky the last 20 feet. And I say falling out the sky, not literally, but it starts descending quickly. You could still do this maneuver. Even though you're going to touch down, it would at least reduce that rate of descent slightly by getting some energy into the engines and so on. So yeah. So anyway, autopilot off. There it is. Double click on the Boeing. Doesn't work like the Airbus. So we're just going to keep aiming towards that touchdown zone.
100.
50 feet over the threshold.
50. 30.
Into the flare.
20.
And let's just pretend, let's mess it up on purpose.
10.
So we've gone long. I've floated down the runway now. Okay, go around. Full throttle. Disconnect the auto throttle system. There's touchdown. Just hold the nose where it is. The thrust has come in now. Auto thrust is off. We're through the approach speed and the airplane starts climbing. We're away from the ground, pitching up to 15 degrees. And now I'm just going to hold it at 15 degrees. The airplane's stable now. We have a lot of drag with the gear and flaps, but we can now take a moment to do it properly. So now I'm going to say, okay, we're climbing away safely. Go around. Push the toga button. Flaps 20. Flaps up one stage. Pitching to the flight director. Positive rate. Gear up. Gear up. And now I'm going to engage LNAV and the autopilot and let the airplane do the hard work. Speed, LNAV out, autopilot. It's climbing to 3,000 feet. It's got the gear up. We're in the right flap setting, flaps 20. We're safely climbing away just as we did earlier. But this one is from the runway itself. So quite a bit more exciting, but nonetheless, very similar technique. The difference is you need to get the auto throttle system out because that toga system may not work. And now the airplane can level off at 3,000 and we're away. And now we will accelerate the aircraft normally. Now here's what I was talking about earlier. You'll notice we've leveled off. It is not accelerated. So I would do that manually so I can wind the speed up. Because I haven't pushed VNAV or anything like that here. So let's say we want to go to 200 knots. Maybe we'll keep some flaps out. Flap 5. Above 5. The Boeing's very good. It will limit its speed. It's actually a bit better than the Airbus. It's one of the things it does for you that the Airbus doesn't. It will go to the bottom of the flap limiter. It's very good. Flap 1. And then we'll stay at flap 1 this time. How about that? Oh, if I actually do it properly. There we go. Stay at flap 1 because we might want to maneuver immediately for downwind. But you'll notice, look at this, the limiter has stayed at go around. So that's what I was talking about earlier. Either you push the altitude window or we press flitch and then that forces it into climb, or we could have pressed climb continuous. But there we go. So that is a bit more exciting and involves a few traps, but by going full throttle and disconnecting the auto thrust, we ensure the energy gets into the airplane, and then it's just about stabilizing the airplane and not rotating too early. Otherwise, of course, if you're on the runway with low energy and you rotate too quickly, you could strike the tail of the airplane on the ground. So there we are, that's all for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope it's been interesting for you. Like I said, lots of different features of the Boeing 777 that come into play when you fly a go around, and it's interesting to see the differences over the A320 family. You do have to be a bit more aware of your modes, and because of that auto throttle system being staying engaged regardless of what you do with the thrust levers, it's important that you do disconnect it if you do that bulk landing, just to make sure that you do definitely get the thrust on. A couple of traps as well. Once you're up in the air, you need to remember to get the climb thrust limited correctly, get the VNAV sequence correctly, but otherwise it's just an aeroplane. You can just set up and fly another approach. There'll be plenty more videos, guides and live streams coming, including on the 777, which, like I say, I can give you some more context on now, thanks to some real world experience, but also in other airplanes and live streams as well. So thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again in another video or live stream. Thank you. Bye bye.